Hi, in this video we'll talk about pre-flop opening ranges. The goal is to give you a basic understanding of which hands that are good to open from each position against a good opponent and why. We'll cover the basic theory behind selecting these ranges, some very important considerations, factors which will affect your range by either widening it or making it more narrow, and last of all, we'll go through which ranges we recommend from each position. Now, let's look at the basic theory. It's fairly easy for us to select which value hands to raise with from each position. But more importantly, we need to find a threshold for the weakest hands we want to include in our range. Basically, which bluffs we want to include in our range. Since folding has an expected value of 0, the weakest part of our range should be hands that have an expected value close to 0 but just above it. Some hands might have an expected value of 0 if you open them 100%, meaning if you open all the combinations of these hands in every situation. But by selecting to only open these hands less than 100% of the time, you can find an expected value very close but still above 0. The hand you open as the weakest hand should have a total expected value of more than our opening bet size when called. Let's look at some math behind finding the threshold of which hands to open. If you open raise to 3 big blinds, and in order to win the small and the big blind, which is 1.5 big blind together, you need to win 66% of the time to make an immediate profit, meaning your opponent needs to fold 66% of the time. You calculate this by taking the raise size, which is 3, divided by your raise plus what's already in the pot. So what this tells us is that if your opponent's behind is 3-betting 33% or more combined, your hand is too weak to open since you would have to fold too often. The bluffs and the weaker hands we put in our range are also selected based on how well they play post-flop, how well they cover the board, which means we want to be able to have a hand regardless of if the flop is high cards, middle cards or low cards. Blockers are also important as this limits the combination of hands our opponent can have of certain strong hands. Here are some very important considerations before we take a look at which hands we recommend to play. Having a solid post-flop strategy is absolutely vital, especially if you raise a fairly wide range of hands. If you don't feel comfortable bluffing a lot and knowing how to play weaker hands post-flop, I recommend to play a more tight range in the beginning until you learn more. These ranges are suggestions and they're based on play versus good opponents. The key is not to memorize these exact ranges, but to learn which type of hands go into which ranges and why. New players should likely defend a bit less from the blinds than suggested here, because playing post-flop out of position with a weak range is gonna be tricky. The bluffs listed are meant to give you a sense of good bluffing hands, but this doesn't mean these are only the hands you should be bluffing. If you only bluff these hands, this will be fairly transparent to your opponent after a while. Certain factors will decide whether you should widen your range or make it more narrow. In case of widening your range, some main factors are if there are weak players at the table, then you want to raise more hands for value. If there are a lot of tight players at the table, you can bluff a lot more and basically try to run over the table. If you bet a smaller bet size, this allows you to open more hands. As your opponents are forced to defend more, you can get away from more hands at the same time. The main factors which should tighten your range are if there's loose aggressive players left to act, in the blinds for example. You don't want to raise as wide from the button. You want to tighten in your bluff range against aggressive short stacks at the table. You also want to tighten your range when you're out of position and you're playing deeper than 100 big blinds. Now, let's look at which range we recommend to open from early positions, meaning under the gun +1, and under the gun +2. The value hands we open are aces down to pocket threes, ace-king offsuit down to ace-jack offsuit, ace-king suited to ace-10 suited, king-queen suited down to king-10 suited, king-queen off, queen-jack off, and queen-jack suited and queen-10 suited. And now we're getting towards the bluff part of our range, which will be jack-10 suited, jack-9 suited, 10-9 suited, 9-8 suited, 8-7 suited, 7-6 suited, and 6-5 suited. These hands are good bluffing hands because they give you good board coverage, they play fairly well post-flop, and you're rarely dominated. Here is the suggested opening range from middle position. Value hands are pocket aces down to pocket deuces, ace-king offsuit down to ace-10 offsuit, so we add another ace here compared to the under the gun range. We also add some more suited aces. We skip ace-6 suited as this is the worst suited ace since you can't really get as many straights. We play king-queen suited down to king-10 suited, still only king-queen off, no more offsuit kings compared to the under the gun range. Queen-jack suited, queen-10 suited, and as you can see here as well, the bluff part of our range will be some good suited connectors, but I will also count these lower suited aces as sort of on the bluff side of our range. You can flop very strong draws. You have the ace high card, which you can alt flop, for example, pocket queens or whatever. Here's the suggested opening range from cutoff. Value hands in terms of pocket pairs are all of them, aces down to deuces. We also open all suited aces. I would say at least half of them are for value, but the lower suited aces we can consider to be part of a bluff range. But people will call fairly wide from the late position, so we can have a fairly wide value range here. In terms of offsuit kings, we've added king-jack off here compared to early position and middle position. We also add a lot more suited kings. I would say usually down to king-9 suited for value. King-8 suited, king-7 and king-6 suited are good bluff cards. You have blockers with a king. You can flop strong pairs and pretty strong draws. We add queen-jack offsuit and queen-jack suited down to queen-7 suited. I would consider queen-jack suited down to queen-9 suited to be for value here. Suited jacks, we play jack-10 suited down to jack-8 suited. And I would consider jack-10 suited to be for value. Jack-9 suited is sort of in between, and jack-8 suited, of course, is a good bluffing hand here to try to steal the blinds. And if we do get called, we can still flop a decent hand. Then we also add some good suited connectors here for the same reasons as mentioned previously. Here is our suggested opening range from the button. A lot wider than any other position, as you can see, 47.5%. We open all pocket pairs for value, all suited aces, all suited kings, all suited queens. You can also see here we open quite a few suited jacks, 10s, 9s, 8s, 7s, down to 6-4 suited, 5-3 suited, and 4-3 suited would be the weakest suited hand in our range. We also open all offsuit aces, king-queen offsuit down to king-7 offsuit, queen-jack offsuit down to queen-9 offsuits, jack-10 down to jack-9 offsuit, and 10 and 9 offsuit hands we open down to 10-8 and 9-8 offsuits. So big part of this range, of course, is for value. I would say in terms of suited hands, pretty much all of the aces. Kings, I would say down to maybe King 9, King 8 suited for value. Queens down to Queen 8 at least. Jacks, Jack 8 I would say is probably where our hand is right between a bluff and a value hand. Of course, all of this depends on the opponents, but it's good to have a sense in general of why we open these hands. Some of these suited hands and worse suited high card hands as well are good bluff hands because you can flop good pairs, good draws. They're fairly easy to play post flop. We want to avoid this part of our range here, so you can see the offsuit hands that are far apart, so you won't really be able to flop many straight draws. Suited hands, we avoid the weakest ones basically. Finally, let's look at our opening range from the small blind. It's also fairly wide, 36.3%. We open all pocket pairs, all suited aces, all suited kings, suited queens down to Queen 4, and quite a few suited jacks, 10s and 9s. So you can see a few combinations of, or I would say a couple of combinations of suited 8s, 7s and 6s, and 5-4 suited is the lowest combination here, suited hands. Offsuit we go down to Jack 9 off, Queen 9 off, King 9 off and Ace 7 off. I would say this range is a bit more skewed towards value rather than bluffs. We avoid weak offsuit hands and quite a few weak suited hands. We expect to get called by a wide range from the big blind, so having a wide value range here makes a lot of sense. Still, the bluff part of our range will be the weaker suited hands, the lower suited hands, and of course the weaker offsuit hands. But the way we've selected its hands allows us to still flop strong hands with this range. Before I say goodbye, remember not to just copy these ranges. These are suggested ranges for hands to play against good opponents. Just try to understand why the hands are good to play from each position. Of course, you can use these to rely on when you're not sure of which hands to play, but what will make you a good player is how you can adapt these ranges to different situations. Good luck at the tables. Bye bye.